Our next guest, a longtime resident of Shanghai, was initially a supporter of China's zero-COVID strategy. He's Frank Tsai, the founder of China Crossroads, which is a platform of public lectures in Shanghai, and he's joining me now from that city under lockdown. Frank Tsai, welcome to the program. So let me first start by asking you why you first supported and now do not the zero-COVID policy of the Chinese government.
Well, it's a very good question. I run a business focused on in-person events. And so I have to say that our experience in the first 2 years of COVID in China has perhaps been better than portrayed in much of the Western media. We had a very normal life. Something like 15% of China only to date has been in lockdown. So partly for my own business interests, but partly also because I saw what was happening in the West, and it was a much better experience here for all of us, the expat community.
Well, that's interesting because you're right. We do see, gigantic cities of tens of millions of people having experienced lockdown, which is essentially what is happening where you are right now. Now, the Chinese authorities there say they may be easing it, but just tell me, what is it like for you, the total lockdown? And we've even, we've seen, and there's video of elderly and others kind of shouting from their balconies that they're imprisoned inside and can't even get food.
Sure. Let me just say, to partly answer your previous question, because most of us have never experienced this kind of draconian lockdown, it's easy to support if you haven't experienced it. And if more of China experiences this in the coming months with rolling lockdowns across different cities, I expect the currently very high support for zero COVID to drop. Now, you asked me about my experience. Well, the Western audience should know that, we're confined to our homes. And the major issue is that because we're confined to our homes, all food comes through delivery. And there have been many, many issues with this. It's been a logistical failure and embarrassment for the government. Food comes through delivery workers, but many of them are locked down themselves. And they don't all have the permissions to be essential workers and go out and work. This has actually been improving in the last week or so. But, when a country like China experiences food anxiety and insecurity, this is a major issue of credibility for the government, given that this regime has staked its credibility for decades since its founding on alleviating material anxiety. So it's highly significant for this government right now.
So let me ask you just about the notion of a zero COVID policy. Obviously, some other countries had it. That's all been lifted in every other part of the world, except for in China. And we hear today that the government has said that since March, it's 500,000 new cases they've reported. That is a lot of cases in just the last month. So it doesn't seem to be working. Why does the government insist on this policy?
In a word, the government's been telling the Chinese people for 2 years that this is what makes our system better. So it's a matter of ideology. It's a competition of systems. This is one aspect of it. Now, we have to, look at the government side of things. Given the outbreak in Hong Kong, we could be looking at millions of deaths in China if it really broke out. But, aside from that, it's been a very politicized issue right now in China. There's more sloganeering than one would expect in 2022, with echoes of the past, the more socialist past here in China. And so, zero COVID is becoming an end in itself in China right now. There are, of course, rational people on both sides, but it's very, very important to the regime that we stay near zero and not have a huge outbreak, especially in the lead up to the Party Congress. Now, after that, we might expect some loosening, but the trends now are doubling down on zero COVID.
So just explain also, because it's obviously having an impact on the economy, the Chinese economy, and also supply chains around the world at a time when there's a lot of disruption, because of the war in Ukraine. Again, that doesn't seem to be, it sort of seems to be ideology versus pragmatism. And China, I understood, was meant to be quite pragmatic. So why is it taking, do you think, policy decisions that are affecting its own economy?
Right. We think of China as an economic animal, given the gleaming skyscrapers I can see outside my window right now. But I think what we have to understand is that in this case, politics certainly Trump's economics. There's no way that China will achieve its 5.5% target for this year, because what the regime cares most about is cashing out its promises, in this case, maintaining a very low case count. When for 2 years, people in China have looked at the West and seen so many failures, flailing around with trying to control COVID, a lot of huge debate that we don't really have here in China. People start to think, well, we're better. And so the government reinforces this. And now, if China is seen by the people to fail, this is a huge hit on the government's credibility.
Can I just broaden it just a little bit? The Chinese foreign minister today said, or the ministry, that it would continue to strengthen strategic coordination with Russia, regardless of how the international landscape may change. It just keeps pushing a knife into, like, the EU, the United States. It called the EU in its recent summit essentially a puppet of the United States, not seeming to understand that its biggest trading partner, the EU, actually has a mind of its own when it sees Russia invading, a democratic-leaning country. Why is China doing this? Why does it want to be tethered to what is rapidly becoming an international pariah, Putin's Moscow?
I think that, Ukraine is quite relevant to this. So this is a one-party Leninist state. It's continuous from the Cold War until now. And it's afraid of these kinds of popular movements that we see, especially before in Ukraine and Maidan. And so in that way, it fears the West destabilizing it. The regime fears that. And so it's going to do what it takes to align with Russia and oppose the West in this way. I think, again, we think of China as being all about economic development, but certainly the ruling party takes its ideology very seriously, and more so since Xi Jinping came on board 10 years ago. Now that China has, in very many ways, succeeded economically and modernized, it's going to be less self-conscious about the issues in its ruling ideology and more confident in that its way of doing things is the right way. And frankly, COVID has been a demonstration of that to the Chinese people, and China also believes to the world.
If I said to you the 1958 Maoist sparrow policy, would you know what I was talking about? Okay.
Of course.
Okay, well, this is really, for me, a dramatic example of one-man rule and one-man think. You can explain, but in '58 he decided all the sparrows needed to be eliminated, and that had a knock-on effect that led to famine and the deaths of tens of millions of Chinese by famine. So put that into sort of context with this zero COVID policy and this idea of ideology sometimes trumping pragmatism and sensible policy.
Yeah, I would say that, every regime has to go back to its stories and its DNA. We do the same thing in the United States. We always go back to the Constitution and our founding. So does China. You bring up a very good point. What's happening in China now is that zero COVID is being made an end in itself. You referred to the past, 1958. Many of China's failures in the past were also about seeing some shining ideal. It might have been some socialist paradise in the past. Now it's zero COVID, an end in itself. And so this does point out certain flaws in this regime type. Now, I've just agreed with you. I also heartily disagree with you on another point. This regime is not one-man rule. So I think we make a mistake by analogizing China to Russia in terms of how it's ruled. I think it's uncontroversial to say that Russia is a mafia state with one man on top. China could not launch a war on it. The president here could not launch a war by himself. The Communist Party here is a strong and functioning institution in the sense that, it makes decisions and one man can't say everything. Now, the trends, of course, are toward more centralized power. But, this is a strong institution, and it's not like Russia in that way. Yeah.
Really interesting, fascinating insight. Frank Tsai, thank you so much indeed for joining us.